It's Karen from Celtic Healing Corner again, and we're now up to video 7. So last time we learnt about how to cleanse your crystals, and I must admit that I forgot to add in sound. Sound is another way that you can also cleanse your crystals. So it might be a singing bowl, such as the Tibetan singing bowl. It could be a crystal singing bowl. It could be some rattles, some shamanic rattles, some tingshas. It could be a shamanic drum. So sound and vibration is also a way to cleanse your crystals. And I did mention in the last video that a lot of the things you saw in that video you'd be seeing again in this video, because basically you can actually cleanse and charge your crystals and sometimes even program your crystals all at the same time, just to make it really efficient for you. But I have broken it up because some people do like to do it differently for different things. One of the main ways we said that you could cleanse your crystals was Reiki, and again, this is a very good way to charge and to program your crystals, and we'll talk about programming in the next DVD. As I said, not everybody has Reiki, so it's not always possible, but even Reiki 1 students can still hold the crystal and do their charging and cleansing and programming that way. If you have got Reiki 2, of course, you can use the symbols. But if you don't have that, what can you do? So a lot of the things that you saw before, we're seeing again. So as I said, sound, which I do apologise I missed in the last video, sound can be used, and any of those that we talked about can be used to charge your crystal. Light, so it could be a candle light, but it could also be moonlight. And depending if you want to increase, if the idea is that you want the charge and the programming of your crystal to increase something in your life, so bring more money, bring love, bring abundance or whatever, you would charge it, they say, by the waxing moon, so as it's approaching the full moon. If you're wanting to decrease something in your life, so have less bills, problems, less stress, something that you want to reduce in your life, then you would do it in the waning moon, so after the full moon. But as we discussed in the last DVD, sometimes you have to have quite a lot of time to be able to do that, and it also means that your crystals are out in the elements for that period of time. So it would, to charge it appropriately and cleanse it appropriately, it would be at least 4 to 6 hours. So you're looking at possibly overnight if you're going to use moonlight. Sunlight, again, you could use the sunlight to charge your crystals. Again, it could damage your crystals, so just be aware of that. Soil we talked about. Depending on what it is you're wanting to charge the crystal with, for instance, if whatever you're wanting to use the crystal for has a purpose that needs a lot of strength, that needs a lot of grounding, then you might want to consider putting it in the soil, putting it in the garden, putting it in a pot plant, but just being aware of those things that can cause problems for you, in that crystals can return to the earth and disappear, and you might need to make sure there's a very good marker so that you can find where it is when you need to dig it up. The other thing that you can use is, if you have the opportunity and it's something that you want to use the crystal for, something that's needing a lot of power, a lot of energy, so you want to manifest something, then if you're lucky enough to get a thunderstorm, you can actually put your crystal out in the thunderstorm to absorb those negative ions, and especially if it's lightning, you know, that's even better. But of course you can't always manufacture this, and nature doesn't always turn it on for you, but you will often see crystal guardians or owners. We don't generally like to call ourselves owners, guardians of the crystals. You'll usually see us all running out there, shoving everything out under the thunder and the lightning, because we want that power to come into those crystals. So if you've got that opportunity, certainly you can take it, just keeping in mind that you've got all the negatives of it, that your crystals are probably going to get wet and so forth. It's a balancing act between the two different purposes. The other thing about thunder is if it's a stubborn energy. So for instance, if you've got really bad habits, or if you have an addiction to something, and it might not necessarily be illicit drugs, or it might be, but it might just be you want to give up, you know, your comfort eating, or you want to give up your addiction to chocolate or whatever. If it's an addictive type behaviour, or a really hard pattern that you want to break, then this is the sort of energy that you want to be charging your crystal with, something really powerful and strong. We talked a little bit about light, but also you can use fire, you can use a flame to charge your crystals. Again, just being very careful that you don't damage the crystal in doing so. So just passing it gently through the flame, particularly the top of the flame, because the top of a flame is not as hot as further down. So you just gently want to charge it. I wouldn't recommend leaving your crystal in a fire or over a flame for any great amount of time. We have talked about smoke, and I haven't given you an example of smoke in this because we went through that in quite a lot of detail in the last DVD, but all of those ways of using smoke, through incense, through sage, through floral oils or floral water, any of those can also charge your crystals for you. And you're probably hearing a little theme here because we're starting to talk about water, we're talking about smoke, which represents air. So you can bring in elements. We've talked about soil, which represents the earth. And we've talked about fire. So certainly incorporating the 4 elements is a really powerful way to charge your crystals. And if you want a super duper charged crystal for some really special purpose, then I would recommend using more than one mechanism to charge a crystal. So using the 4 elements and even putting them in the 4 directions. And we talked a little bit about that in the early DVDs when I explained to you that I'm from the northern hemisphere, so my north is earth, whereas in the southern hemisphere you have earth in the south. But as we said before, you find what resonates with you, but you certainly might want to set out a little grid where you've got the 4 elements and the 4 directions, whichever way that resonates for you, and passing your crystal through those all 4. And that would really supercharge your crystals. Another way you can charge crystals is essential oils. If you have any kind of knowledge about oils and how they work, or blending them, you can use that to also charge your crystal, because the elements and the properties of the oils will also transfer into the energy of the crystal. So that's also a really good way, but again, I would recommend you only use pure organic oils that have been cold pressed, and I would only use the very, very smallest amount, particularly if you've only got a small crystal, because you don't want to damage it, and you certainly don't want to make it all oily so that you drop it. But essential oils will pass on the magical ingredients of those herbs into the energy of the crystal as well. And I think that's probably about all I'm going to say about how to charge your crystals, because the next DVD we're going to talk about programming. And really, it's kind of a falsehood to break it all up into 3 separate areas, but I did want to be specific that you do need to do all 3 things. You need to cleanse, you need to charge, and you need to program. But as I've said earlier, it can all happen at the same time. You don't have to do it on separate days or anything like that. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. So I'll see you very soon for how to program your crystals. See you then.